Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Work Your Wellness Biz podcast. I am so excited because today I have my friend Tamara Melton here to talk about storytelling in business, which we're going to cover a lot of different aspects of this. And I'm just excited because I know this is something that is not talked about enough. I think it's a big piece that is missing from a lot of business owners. So that's why I wanted her to bring her on. So hello, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Hello, I'm glad to be here. And we were talking before we went live and recording that we have like concentric circles of friends, or at least some of your clients and everything. So we needed to meet finally.
Yes, we did. We've been chatting for like 20 minutes before we started recording. And I was like, I guess I should stop taking up your time and we can actually record something. Right. But we both live in Atlanta and we both work in the dietitian space. I mean, I'm not a dietitian, obviously, but I work with dietitians. But I would love for you to share what you do because you have a lot going on and I want people to know about it.
Yeah, so I have really two different businesses, three different brands. So the one that I think a lot of, at least dietitians or people in the nutrition space know about is a nonprofit that I co-founded called Diversified Dietetics. And our goal is to help to recruit and support people of color who are going into the nutrition profession because there's so few RDs of color. And why that's important is because everybody eats, right? And food is so closely tied to people's culture. And so our end game, we always say, is to not just to diversify the profession, but also to provide really adequate, really culturally sensitive care for all the communities that we work with. So we provide programming for students, we provide programming for professionals, and then also for educators and preceptors, because they're the ones who actually decide what the profession looks like, just because of the way the educational pathway works. So I'm the executive director and co-founder of that organization. A lot of people are like, oh my gosh, that seems like a job in of itself, which it is. But we are a huge proponent of hiring people. So we have, some staff that we've brought on recently and contractors that we work with, which is awesome because we're able to actually hire some of the folks in our community who've kind of been like day one supporters. Who help us with different programs, some of those programs that we have going on. So that's one of my gigs that I have. And then I also own a company called TSN Nutrition Consultants. I started it in 2007. I was a baby dietitian. So I just, started practicing, I think, in 2007. So I will give credit to my husband, who's an entrepreneur. He was like, you need to set up your LLC because anytime somebody asks you about nutrition, you need to charge them. So he works in banking and all that. So I did, and I'm glad I did because I always had a way to be able to take on projects and run it through my business. And so I was recently able to start working for myself full time, thanks to a COVID-related layoff. That was a blessing that happened in fall of 2020. And so I decided that I wanted to take my practice that I've had since 2007 and really focus on working with people of color, women of color, who are just women's health, just because of my own health journey I had really around reproductive health and with my infertility that I dealt with, and then having my daughters, and then also dealing with fibroids and that condition. So that I do group coaching with my ladies, as I call them, which I really love because in a previous life, I was a professor at Georgia State University here in Atlanta for about 10 years. And so I really love anything that feels like teaching, and group coaching to me feels like teaching. It is teaching. And I just love that kind of camaraderie and everything. So, and then I also love public speaking and all things about books. And I'm a book nerd and very proud of it. And I love writing, and I have written for a very long time. And so I think very unconsciously use storytelling in like everything that I do. I just use it a lot in work. When I was teaching my students, when I was trying to convince somebody to hire me for whatever reason, in public speaking and writing, things like that. And I noticed that not a lot of registered dietitians were using storytelling. A lot of people don't, right? They just, unless they're a really accomplished, speaker, people love it. That's why we watch movies and why we read books and everything. They love it. But I think especially in any sort of a science field, related field, that people get so caught up in being evidence-based and making sure they're doing this and that. So I had seen an opportunity, kind of a need, if you will, kind of in this kind of business coaching space, for someone to teach registered dietitians specifically or other wellness professionals how to use storytelling, not only in public speaking, but also in marketing, because it's such an effective marketing tool and strategy. Like really, if you can tell stories, you can sell, anything to anyone, basically. And so I just didn't see that happening. I saw people talking about storytelling, but they really meant copywriting, which has storytelling to it, but that's very narrow view of what storytelling and how it can be used, because it can be used in any sort of communication, audio, visual, written, those sorts of things. And once I kind of set up shop because I'm the type of person, like I'm setting up shop tomorrow. I don't know what I'm doing. I figure it out. I'm gonna build this plane as I fly it. This is what we're doing. And so I set up shop where people do on Instagram. So that's where I set it up at. And I put it out there like, hey, this is something I'd like to do. The reception was great, but as I got to kind of talking to some dietitians who I thought I'd be providing services around, like, hey, do you have a signature presentation that you want to really amp up the quality of? I will help you with that. It became very clear that, and I should also mention, I focused on like side hustlers and startups. I just really think that those folks are just really fun to work with who are in that space. It became clear that actually understanding how to build a business that is a brand that someone, or a business, I should say, that they really love and that fits their lifestyle, and that's not just cookie cutter what everybody else is doing, was missing. I no shade to other coaches by any means. I think that you can learn anything from anyone that you work with. I feel like just a lot of prescriptive, like, here's how you build a business, here's how you do it, is what's being taught. And that means that a lot of people are ending up with businesses that are very similar to other businesses. So it's not differentiated to the market. You look all the same. And then they don't really like it. Like, they're like, I don't want to do this group coaching, or I don't want to do, I've talked to introverts who are like, group coaching exhausts me. I'm like, then why are you doing it? There's like an infinite amount of ways.
That's me.
You're like, this is, yeah, right. So this is not what you have to do. The cool thing about being dietitians is we're literally not the only, and I guess chefs are similar to us, but we're one of the few, very, very few professions on the planet where literally everybody could potentially be a client. Because everybody eats. There's really no other profession out there. I'm like, there's plenty of work, y'all. Plenty of work to do. So you don't have to do, all you want to do is take pictures of food. That's all you have to do, and you can do really well. So I decided to expand my services to kind of go into storytelling for business coaching, because I could see that people needed more help with just really figuring out the strategy behind their business. And you can use storytelling as a tactic for really building the base of your business, your mindset, the story you tell to yourself, the storytelling we think of traditionally, in advertising, that type of stuff. So I set up shop, tamaramelton.com on the internet. I did it on Instagram first as a storytelling dietitian, which I still have that. And then I created the website to say like, oh, I'm going to really focus in on like really business strategy. And I think my experience doing so many different things, I didn't go into my whole history, but you can read it on my website. I've done a lot of different things. I have about a 3 to 4 year cycle in a job, and then I'm good. And I try to take the thing that nobody has ever done before. Like I have a high tolerance for risk. And clearly I'm this person who's like, I'm going to do all the things. I don't know what I'm doing. Let's go. And so because of that, I've had experience with building a lot of things, a lot of different types of businesses. So so that's what I'm doing now. It's a lot of fun. I really, really enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, storytelling is so key. Like I've seen people teach it, like you take like this Instagram course and then they're really talking a lot about storytelling, or you take a course about public speaking and then they're talking about telling your story. Like it weaves into everything. Exactly. And I think that people think that like, oh, but like they don't really care about my story, but like we like to work with people, not logos. Like we want to work with people. And I have to remind this to my clients sometimes because they want their logo like 5 inches tall on their website. And they're like, but like make the logo bigger. And I don't really want a picture of me on the website. And I'm like, what? Like, but like we are working with you,
right?
Not your logo. Like,
yeah. When you get to the point where you're like Apple and you're a brand like that, then you can just put your logo out there. We are at the point where people are going to choose to work with us because of who we are.
Yep. 100%. So the reason that you and I even started having this conversation about storytelling is because of something I posted on Instagram a while back. And I was talking about, because a lot of people, when they're writing sales pages on their websites, they have a section that's like, this is a good fit for you. This is not a good fit for you and it's basically just kind of like, like if you're a mom, this is a good fit for you. If you're not, like, this is really for moms or whatever it is. But sometimes those bullet points are not great descriptors. Right. They're not great qualifiers because they'll say things like, this is not for you if you don't want to live your best life. And I'm like, literally no one is going to be like, no, I don't want to live my best life today. Right. Maybe next year.
Right. This is not for me.
So, so you and I started talking about websites and copy and dietitians and their websites. And so I wanted to, there's, like we mentioned a little bit ago, there's a lot that storytelling can apply to with Instagram and public speaking, but I really wanted to talk about it in terms of our websites, because that's where people come to hire us, where they learn about our group coaching program or one-to-one services or whatever. So I would just love to hear like your thoughts about how we can incorporate more story on our websites, whether it's a sales page or otherwise, and like how we even start doing that.
So I think that there's so many different places where you can weave in stories on your website, which is your home, right? Literally where people are coming to learn about you, to see if you align with their values, to see if you make them feel good, to see if you get them, to see if you understand what their problem is, what their troubles are, where they're trying to get to. So you could tell people that in these bullet points. I have 8 modules and we're going to talk about these different things and that. And people honestly don't care. They don't care about the features. They could care all the way less. I always tell people hire us to help them to get to something else. So by that, I mean, when somebody comes to me and let's say I work with women's health and they want to find a way, the ladies that I work with, they want to find a way to get healthier. They don't really care about the nutrition. And by that, I mean, they really want to be around to see their grandchildren grow up. They really want to not have to deal with maybe some of the conditions that their grandmother dealt with. That's where they want to get to. So they are using me, hiring me as a dietitian to be the guide to get them there. So the stories that I need to tell them need to show them, when you work with me, I'm going to help you get there so that you're going to be able to get down on the floor and play with your grandchildren. That's a story. What I just said to you in those little words, everybody knows a grandparent who's down on the floor playing with a toddler and the baby's like laughing, and that's a story, and that's what people want to hear. And so if you really put the work into your website, and there's different types of stories for different reasons that you might have, but if you're putting work into the copy, then you're going to be thinking about what's a way that I can use stories to basically show to this person that I understand what you're going through. I'm going to help you get to where you want to be. And you're the person, I'm the person that you want to work with. And oh boy, stories, they do such interesting things in our brains. They release oxytocin, which is that feel good hormone, to the storyteller. So when you're the person telling a story to someone else, that person starts to feel good towards you. They start to trust you more. People who trust you will buy from you. And so on your website, if you're putting in stories about client stories, who are clients who have overcome whatever challenges because they worked with you, not so much about the appointments with you, but what was the life like before they met you? I couldn't get down on the floor with my grandchildren. I just really had a hard time doing that. Versus afterwards, like now I'm able to have all this energy to work, to be with my grandchildren, and I'm going to be around for a long time to watch them grow up. That's what they want to hear. And that's what they want to see, not the features of the program. And so I think we're going to talk about it, but I think that there's different areas that you should really, if you're just starting out, because you might be overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, okay, now I got to go take a creative writing class. And it's not that deep. There's ways, I think, quick ways that you can kind of get started with this on your own website.
Yeah. I think speaking of the client stories, that's one of my favorite things, like favorite tips to tell people is instead of just emailing clients and being like, can you send me a testimonial? Okay. Like Jessica was great. It's like, they don't know what to say, she was so nice. Okay. Thank you. But like asking something, and I've shared this on the podcast before, but asking something along the lines of like, what were you struggling with before? And like, did it come true? Sorry, that's two different questions. I just combined in my head. What was something you were struggling before? And then like, what was a fear that you had about working with me? And did it come true? Because then they're like, oh, I was really struggling with getting healthy and not feeling well. And then they're like, I was so scared that you were going to like take away all my favorite foods and it didn't. And now I feel great. And, like I've seen this, and this happen in my health. And there you go. Now you have a very nice testimonial that actually shows the before and after that like you just mentioned, instead of just, she's really nice.
Because just the testimonials are going to be the same thing over and over. She's really nice. I got what I thought I'd get, that's not evoking any emotion out of the people who are reading about these testimonials. The best Yelp reviews have stories in them, good or bad, right?
Yes.
Good or bad. They tell a story of this waiter coming in and he or she did like the best thing ever, or, he or she, and the more details they put in there, the more we're like, oh, like they're like, no, they didn't do this. And then they did that. And then they did that. The person was telling you a story, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you also want your future clients to read. But you have to your point, you have to guide your happy clients to help them to write those stories. So I actually, at the time that this airs, people can go to my website and have a free downloadable client story template that you can get and you can take and you can use to gather these. They're not going to be testimonials at this time. You can call them that, but they're actually going to be client stories that they can actually use. So so I think that another place where people can tell their story, and here's the thing about, especially in nutrition or wellness, we're working with clients who sometimes look at us and they look up to us and feel like where we are is not achievable for them. You're somebody who has a degree in nutrition and you're like person who's like the pinnacle up here. And so there is a risk that we take when we share our own story, especially if we don't have the same health condition of the groups that we work with. If we're where they think they want to be, even though they don't know what's going on in our personal lives, we might be a hot mess, but they don't know that, right? So how do you craft your own story on your about page, your about me page, which I always tell people should be your story page? Well, think about what is it that you can present about yourself and describe about yourself that will help the person who's coming to your page to say, this is the person I want to work with.
Yep.
So they don't really care about all the schools we went to. They don't care about that unless there was something happened at that school that said to them, wow, this is why this person is passionate about this. Of course, if you share the same condition that you help other people to overcome or manage, you can absolutely tell that story about how your own nutrition has helped you there. But you want to think about that and craft it into a story. It's not a bio. It's not like a bio that you're going to have somebody read off, but it's actually a story. It has a beginning, a middle, and end. It has some authentic emotion to it. It has specific details in there. It's going to be those sorts of things. And it's something that you really want to spend a good amount of time on and creating it. I will say, I'm working with a copy editor right now who's on my tamaramelton.com where I'm talking about storytelling. I put my story in and I told her, tear it apart. Having an editor to work with is so helpful. I do think that people should write their own copy. That's just my opinion because you know your story the best. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then it's your voice. Like you said, people are hiring you. But I do think you also should work with a copy editor. And that person should, really come back and tear it apart. Like that's what anybody who's been in writing knows that the editing process is painful, But let me tell you that any books that you love, trust me, somebody edited that.
Yes.
You would not want the first draft of that, right?
Yes.
If you have somebody who's editing that and really looking over your story, think about what it is that you can say about yourself. You're still showing that you have the credentials, but really showing why is it that people would want to work with you. So it's not a bio. That's something I work with my clients on. With my coaching clients, we look at their websites if they have them built already. If they don't, then we're going to look at their copy and create the story. Mm-hmm. What is it that we can craft the story into? It can be very strategic about what you don't have to say everything. You're going to reveal certain things, and the stories you craft are going to get you and the person's mind as like the expert.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that people struggle with is they're like, oh, I have to tell my story. So then I have to spill all these details. And I'm like, well, no, you get to dictate like what details are included or not included. And
exactly,
that just depends on how comfortable you are with sharing that information. Like it's just up to you. I don't think there's any right or wrong with what you share. But since you mentioned it, because I do know that, yes, there are a lot of dietitians who are like, oh, I have IBS, so I help people with IBS. Mm-hmm. But I do know, because I've had clients who are like, I don't have IBS, but I do help people with IBS. And like they have felt like, I don't know, like I'm not supposed to help these people because I don't have this condition, but it's like how that, their internship or whatever, like got them onto this path and now they love it. So how would they craft their story, since it's not like, hey, this is like how I dealt with my diagnosis and like how I've handled my own IBS? Like what kind of stories do they share on their website to help connect with their clients?
So I think what you just said, the first one being, I was in my internship and then I got exposed to this and then I fell in love with it because why? You usually fall in love with it because you were able to see how you were able to help people or, really keeping it client focused. So telling people why you decided to go into this area, that way they can start to trust you. Like you're not just trying to take advantage of their situation. There was this genuine feeling of wanting to help. And then that's when you shift into what are your client success stories? Those can be about your story too. So when you had that first client that you really helped them to reach their goals, that's when you knew you wanted to stay in this area. You could have been an intern while you were doing it. You could have been a dietitian working for a few years or 10 years or whatever, but that can be part of your story too. That can be on your story. Your page doesn't only have to be about you. It's your story as to why you got to where you are. And that helps them to feel like, wow, this is why he or she decided to go into IBS and working with clients like me who have this condition. And then, oh, wow, this is how they help somebody really to reach their goals, which is to live life without being interrupted by all the symptoms of IBS.
Yeah.
Then that's what you can do and share that. So I always tell people there's lots of obstetricians who are men. Yeah. And they're still good at what they do, right?
Yes, that is very true.
A person who has the condition or who is that person who actually would have that whatever to be able to practice in the area. We know that. Right? Yeah. There's a lot of docs who are oncologists. They don't have cancer and they're still, kind of remove that.
I've had type 1 diabetes for 27 years and I've never had a doctor who was actually diabetic.
Exactly. No endocrinologist that you met. No. And it's so remove that kind of limiting thought from yourself that if we dietitians only work with people who have the same conditions as us, there wouldn't be enough of us working with people who get trained in that, right?
Yeah.
There's not enough of us right now to work with literally all the people on the planet who could possibly work with us, right? Think about it. There's not enough of us. So we have to be okay with having that. But yeah, sharing your story of, I always tell people I went into nutrition because I was going to be a chef. I was planning to go to Miami. I had my little acceptance I was living in Jacksonville, Florida. I was going to go to Miami and go to Johnson & Wales University. And I was chatting with my grandma one day. And I remember she was like cooking in the kitchen and everything. And she mentioned that she'd been diagnosed with diabetes. And I was like, okay. And I said, well, what are you supposed to eat? Because she's cooking in the kitchen like she normally does. And she turned to me and she's like, I don't know. And I said, well, how do you not know what to eat? And she said, they didn't tell me what to eat. And from that day, I was like, well, who are the people who teach people how to eat if they have diabetes? And that's when I discovered a dietitian.
Nice.
That was my story of why I went into nutrition. I also did something there, y'all. I told you a story.
Yes, you did.
I did.
And I literally was like, I had like a video in my head playing of like you in the kitchen. Like there's imagery playing in my head as you, even earlier when you were talking about being a grandparent on the ground with your grandchild, like I had that image in my head of, it was, stock footage, but like, it's like a commercial playing in my head, but like that helps. Like that's so much more engaging than like just talking about the modules and how many worksheets and
or even like, hey, I wanted to go into nutrition because I was going to be a chef, but my grandma got diagnosed with diabetes and then I decided I want to become a dietitian. I mean, it's the same thing.
Right. But
it's a far different experience for you as a listener.
Yeah. And that's one thing. I mean, going back to talking about like the sales pages, like, or your service pages, whatever you want to call them. It is like, I've seen dietitians who have their sales pages where it's just like, this is what I do. Here's a 3-month meal plan, or I do this 6-month program, or I have this other thing. And like, that's it. There's no like the before and after. Here are your pain points. Here's how I can help. Like, it's just like, this is how I work with you. This is what's included. You get 5 calls and a PDF.
There it is.
And I'm like, there is no connection on this page. Like
no connection. Like that's, and then also I could really interchange you with any other dietitian.
Yes.
Right? So I could take you out and plop somebody else in, and there's nothing about you that makes me remember you, going to differentiate you from a different person. Now, if you were to say something that made me remember you because you had some sort of element that you talked about, either your program itself and how it was going to help me as the client to get where I wanted to be. But even if it's talking about, if you feel the need, like you got to describe your program, like, do you need to describe like what it feels like to be in the Zoom room with you? Is it a fun, engaging Zoom room? Is it like a safe space? Do you have a story around a client who described that? I had told a story the other day where I was teaching, I was telling you this before we started recording. I was teaching a couple of weeks ago to my ladies in my group coaching about the woman cycle, like the female cycle. And a lot of them thought before they learned it, they knew this. I asked them, like, raise a hand. I have 6 ladies in the room so I can see them like on the screen. And they're like, oh yeah, we know this. Well, not everybody, but most of them. And they realized, I could see their faces progressively realizing how little they knew. To one person got to the point to where she was visibly agitated. And she just, towards the end, she unmuted and she said, I have to say something. She's like, I'm so angry that I did not know this. And my doctors never talked to me about this. And they've been putting me on birth control. And I've been having these issues. They've just been masking by putting me on birth control. And she said, I'm just so, I don't really know. And I said, I know, you kind of have to sit with this. And all the rest of the ladies are like nodding their heads thinking, yes. Well, that was me giving you a story of what happened in the Zoom room with me. That can sell my services to you. If I really just feel the need to talk about a feature. I talked about a feature of my program, but it was through a client's story.
Yes.
How she had an aha moment.
Yep.
Still centering the client.
Yep. I love it. I love it. Okay. So we've convinced the listeners. They're like, okay, I'm ready. I can feel it. They're convinced. They're ready to include more story. They're like, okay, ladies, I'm listening. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
What do we like? What are the elements we need to include in our story? Like what makes a good story on our website?
So and if you've heard me on any other podcast or anything, or follow me on Instagram, you hear that I love this book by Kendra Hall called Stories That Stick. I know there's a story brand guy out there. He's fine too, but this is the one I like. Why? Because I'm like, yeah, he's fine. I mean, he is, but I think that one, she's a storyteller. She's somebody who's gone to, I think it's like Jonesboro, Tennessee, and that's where they do like the great storytelling festivals.
Nice.
She is a legit trained storyteller. And does those sorts of things. And she has 4 elements that when I read that, I was like, that resonated with me. No matter how big or small the story is that you're telling, that you would have a relatable character. She says they don't have to be a hero, which I think is interesting, right? It just needs to be a relatable character, right? Because sometimes a villain's a relatable character. They're not a hero, but we understand where they're coming from. Like, I understand why you blew up that building, Mr. Villain, right?
Yes, yes.
You're a relatable character. They also have a story too. So You have a relatable character, which for us, a lot of times would be our client stories or something like that. And then you want to have specific details. So as I was telling you the story about the Zoom room or my grandma in the kitchen or the grandparent on the floor with a toddler who's like, those are specific details, right?
Yeah.
That's what you just said allowed you to form the picture in your head, stock photo, but still you formed a picture in your head because I just gave you a few different details and you kind of colored it around it. So have those specific details. The third element is authentic emotion. So having authentic emotion of be it happy, sad, glad, frustrated, irritated, agitated. I used that word just a second ago. Those sorts of things that people all have felt those emotions too. So if you either say the words or you describe the emotion, somebody threw a book down, well, they might be upset. Right? So you're describing an action that means that the person has authentic emotion. And then you want to have a significant moment. And the significant moment when you're telling stories in a business perspective is really important because that's usually the moment, not where the person, it's usually not with you as the practitioner, right? Because remember, we're trying to help them get to where they want to be. It's usually when I can now get down on the floor and I realize I've been down here for 20 minutes with my grandchild and I don't feel exhausted and my knees don't hurt. That's a significant moment, right? That's what you want people to really hear. So those 4 elements, that relatable character, you want to have specific details, authentic emotion, significant moment. If you can put that into every story that you write, and it does not have to be in that order. Let me just say that. So I'm not saying like you're putting that in this order. You're just writing a story. And I tell people like, do a brain dump. I'll tell my clients, if you're struggling with actually writing it down or typing it out, walk away from any sort of device where you can scribe it, walk away and actually talk about it. Because we all talk in stories all the time. And then take your phone, because we all have this, and voice note it to yourself. Have it transcribed to your note and just talk. We call stream of consciousness in writing. Just talk. And then you're going to get down. The writer's block will tend to go away. Or go and watch stories. Go watch Netflix or something. And then you'll come back more energized. But usually you need to walk away from the paper or the laptop or something like that. And that'll get your stories going. And then you have stories all around you. So start to keep them, like keep notes of them about clients, your children, yourself, things that you heard on the radio. If you think there's a shortage of stories, you're just not thinking about what stories can be. Like you can make a story out of anything. We have seen stories of some of the best movies writers, some stories where people are like enclosed in spaces by themselves and that can become a whole movie or something. So there's stories all around you.
Yeah. I think sometimes it can be helpful. I've heard before, like at the end of the day, like just scribble down like things that happened that day. Like maybe not every single, like, okay, I answered emails, like maybe not the boring things, but like think about like what were some like either just like nice moments, like fun moments, something interesting, something like there are always things that at least in my day that I'm like texting or Voxering or Marco Poloing my friends about and being like, oh my gosh, I have to tell you this thing.
I did that same thing. You and I have, she's actually my absolute best friend, but she's been a client of yours, Carrie Roberts, and we Voxer or text or call every day. And I was talking to her this morning about there's a group that I'm in the group, but it's a Facebook group, and there's somebody on there talking about how they didn't get their client to like sign, they're a coach, and so they didn't get the client to sign a contract. And I'm like, and in her screenshots, like, what do you mean they can't get the client to like book the call? I'm like, how are you charging this much and you don't have a contract? And she's saying, Carrie's like, I know this is crazy, but these people are charging this money. I'm like, this just shows that you can charge all the money in the world. And that's a whole story. And that was just a text exchange between two really good friends. That could maybe prove the point when I'm working with a coaching client. Hey, if there's people out here who don't even have sense enough to send out a contract, y'all, if you're listening and you're not sending out contracts,
get a contract.
Get a contract. That's the moral of this story. But I could use it as a story to say, you know what? There are people out here who aren't even as thorough as you, who are charging 3 times as much as you. That's a story about a mundane thing of texting a friend back and forth.
Yep. Just keep track of those little stories and they can relate to something. You can use them at some point. Like just jot them down. You never know. Maybe you don't use them. Maybe you do, but you have them. You have a story bank full of ideas. So yeah. Well, this has been super helpful. And I hope that people right now are writing it down in their planner. They're going to go write a story for their website. Right. I hope it's on their to-do list, because this is so important. It's so important. We cannot have these stale websites. We need to know the person behind the logo, behind the name. Like, we need to know who you are. So start telling your stories. Before we hop off, I'd love for you to share where we can connect with you online and learn more about working with you.
Yeah, so you can find my website is tamaramelton.com. And then on IG for my storytelling business coaching is at the.storytelling.dietitian. So that's where you can find me there. So, and then from there, you can find me everywhere. So just find me there and I'll meet you there.
Just find her there. I will put the links in the show notes so you guys can go follow her, connect with her. She's amazing. Make sure you get connected. But thank you so much for being here.